Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody had a great lunch and y'all won all kinds of cool stuff from the exhibit area there. I understand in my absence I won some Virginia Tech tickets. Is that right, Captain? All right, good deal. I'll be looking for those later. So I want to thank Verizon. As you see these nice bags on your chairs there, make sure you pay attention to what's in there. Thank you, Verizon, for sponsoring the general session. And the break, which was sponsored again by NAFCare Incorporated. So I want to make a quick announcement before we move to our esteemed speaker, Ms. Jackson from the Department of Forensic Science. Tomorrow morning, I know, look, I'm just going to keep it real with everybody. Friday mornings, I know people tend to kind of float out and start to depart, and that's certainly your prerogative to do so. I want to encourage you to stay for the morning sessions. Admiral Lee is going to be here in the morning, and Netflix is supposed to be here to record or otherwise rebroadcast his comments and programs. So we encourage you to have good attendance. Obviously support him, and would look good if there was a well-attended audience. So, our next speaker, as I said, is Linda Jackson. She's the director of the Virginia Department of Forensic Science. Linda was initially appointed as the director of the Virginia Department of Forensic Science by Governor McDonnell in 2013 to fill an unexpired term. She was reappointed by Governor McAuliffe in 2017 for a 6-year term. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Wake Forest and a master's degree in chemistry from North Carolina at Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. She began her career with DFS in 1995 as a controlled substance examiner and was then promoted to mass spectrometer operator, section supervisor, controlled substances section chief, and chemistry program manager before assuming her current position. As chemistry program manager, she managed all technical aspects of the controlled substances, toxicology, and trace evidence disciplines. She was a member of the International Scientific Working Group for Seized Drug Analysis from its inception in 1997 until 2014, and served as vice chair from 2013 to 14, and she served in the White House Subcommittee on Forensic Science Interagency Working Group on Standards, Practices, and Protocols. Let's give her a warm sheriff's welcome to Linda Jackson.
Thank you very much. Good job with mass spectrometer. That was awesome. That was a stretch for me. All right. These lights are impressive. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you today some information about the Department of Forensic Science and the services that we provide and where we are in certain areas, and give you some updates about that type of information. The first thing that I wanted to start with was just full disclosure to tell you kind of where we are with our case turnaround times for the different disciplines. Certainly, we've had some changes in what has been coming in the door for us to analyze, and that has definitely affected the backlogs and turnaround times. So just so that you know where we are, this is a list of the disciplines which we currently provide statewide, so controlled substances, toxicology, the digital and multimedia evidence, forensic biology, firearms, latent prints, and trace evidence. And you can see that there are, in calendar year 17, there are several sections where we have received more cases in the door than we have completed, which obviously puts us in a position where things are slowing down instead of speeding up. And so the numbers that you normally hear about are our backlogs and our turnaround times. And so it is true, our controlled substances backlog has grown to over 10,000 cases. It's actually over 11,000 cases right now. And I'll talk about some things that we're doing to try and work on that. And the current turnaround times, the average turnaround times for drug analysis is really more like 140 days. For toxicology, we have gotten new toxicologists and forensic scientists in the budget last year. We got 6 new positions, and so our turnaround times for toxicology have actually been decreasing. And toxicology does all of the driver, blood, alcohol, and blood DUID testing, as well as the post-mortem toxicology for the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office. And so in order for them to get the information so that they can put forward the death certificates and that type of thing, we're providing that testing to them. And we do have a bunch of new methods that have gone online in toxicology looking for fentanyl and fentanyl analogs so that that information can be provided as well. The digital and multimedia, we generally are doing the more complicated cases. I know most law enforcement agencies have some digital multimedia capability in-house, but we have been working through some new technology so that we're able to do some of those more complicated, not just a straight up cell phone type of evidence. Firearms, we have been getting a lot of firearms submitted. Actually, about 2 years ago, the ATF was going around doing their rounds, encouraging folks to submit all guns for NIBIN examination, and so based on that, we have restructured our firearms section, and I'll talk a little about that to try and address that. And lastly, latent prints and trace evidence. We do have quite a few people in training in various sections, and so because of that, we are transferring cases around. When we do get larger backlogs, we want to make sure that if we only have, such as in our drug section or our controlled substances section, we only have 5 trained drug examiners right now in our northern lab in Manassas. And so we are transferring quite a few cases down to our Richmond lab so that they can be worked, because we don't want it to be where cases in Norfolk are getting 60-day turnaround times, but cases in Northern are getting 200-day turnaround times. The whole concept of the Department of Forensic Science is that everyone in the state has access to the same level of forensic science services, and so we're trying to move cases around so that we can make sure that no one is having too long to wait. So the sections where we're doing those transfers are firearms and tool marks, forensic biology, and controlled substances. Obviously, this map is those are the jurisdictions for which lab the evidence will go to, and those are the same for the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. So because we know that we have a huge deficit in what we're able to do in controlled substances, we did request funding from, we spoke with DPB in our secretary's office, and it was placed in both the governor's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget, these positions. There are 8 positions, 6 of them are for controlled substances because of the opioid crisis that has done a number on submissions. So six controlled substances, 1 digital and multimedia, and 1 in forensic biology that will help with new methodology implementation. And then also we asked for money to pay for overtime for our forensic biology and our controlled substances examiners to be able, while we're waiting and training folks to get online, to be able to do that. And that was also placed in the caboose budget. And whether or not that gets passed or not is still up in the air, unfortunately. So our website, a couple years ago, we retooled our website, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things that are available on our website so that you are aware. Obviously, all of our manuals are online if you're ever interested in how we do any particular testing. So if you have a latent unit in your office and you want to see how we do latent exams, our methods are right there so that you can look at those. Obviously, the evidence handling and laboratory capabilities guide that's put out by our forensic training section is online. Now all breath alcohol records are online, and that has really reduced the number of requests for information that we get for those DUI records for the breath tests and the breath instrument calibrations. We were getting about 100 FOIAs or subpoenas ducis tecum a week, and that has dropped in half since we've put these records online, because people can look at it and say, oh, well, there's nothing here, move on without doing that request, which has been great. The most recent thing that we have added is our current turnaround times are now on our website in an easy to find place. Right now they are right on the front, so that if you have a judge or someone who is asking, what our current turnaround times are, you can have an answer. And I wanted to point out that the other thing that is available on our website is the way to order the different forensic kits that we provide. We provide the kits for collecting sexual assault evidence as well as the DUID blood evidence, and that we do that so that it's all packaged the same way, people take the same type of evidence, and that's why it's actually very cost effective for us to pay for those kits so that the evidence is easy for us to handle because it's all in the same format. But we did get funding restored to our budget to allow us to buy the Duquesnoy-Levine marijuana field test kits again, and so I just wanted to point that out so that if anyone is not taking advantage of the free Duquesnoy-Levine field test kits to go online and get set back up with your passwords so that you can request those. And here's the page with the average case turnaround times, and right now that is right on the front of our website when you open it up, that you can click on that. And it will be updated every month. So it's an average of all the cases that were worked in the previous month. So just some information about the different sections within our laboratory. So for breath alcohol, we are looking to update the instruments that are in, that we own the instruments, but they live in different law enforcement facilities, and we train the operators to use them. They have some, state-of-the-art technology like dial-up modems and dot matrix printers, and we're actually going to update those in the next year or so, and the instrument will be upgraded basically, but use some of the same guts, and so it'll have the ability to change the box that it's in, and that will allow the LAN connection as well as for a laser printer connection. And so if you have an instrument in your facility and it is somewhere where you think that hooking it up to the internet will pose a problem, please contact our breath alcohol folks so that we can help plan for that. So our forensic training section, now we have a grant that has let us hire a part-time trainer to help facilitate these training sections, and our training now offers our forensic Science Academy 3 sessions instead of 2, and so with 12 attendees in each one, that brings us up to 36 a year that we can train, and we know that that still is probably going to leave us a line to get into that training, but I just wanted to give a couple of reminders. So right now, the 2018 ones are all full. They've just done the interviews last week for the Spring Forensic Science Academy of 2019. In order to be considered for the interview to get into the session, you have to have your folks fill out the application online, which is not, it's all online. But then there also has to be an agency head endorsement, which is filled in. So until that agency head endorsement is submitted, which can be filled out by a supervisor, but it has to be signed by the agency head or sheriff. And so until we get that, they will not be put on the line for an interview. And so we have about 40 applicants that have never received that form, and so if you're interested to know if you're on that list, I have it with me. I will not call anyone out. But we do have some folks, who applied in 2016 that have never had the agency head endorsement submitted, and that could be that they are no longer in a position where they're eligible to attend the Forensic Science Academy, or maybe their agency head is not wanting to, endorse that particular person. But there are agencies I know that are interested in having people trained because, the folks that they had trained previously have moved to different positions. So I just didn't want that to be the limiting reagent for the chemistry people. I'm sure there's lots of chemistry people here, so makes me happy. So let's see, firearms. So for firearms, as I said, we had about 2 years ago, we had a huge increase in the number of firearms that were submitted. And so we have retooled how we have our sections set up. So we now have 8 forensic scientist NIBIN positions, where what they are trained to do is they are trained to do a function test of a firearm, and then they are trained to do the NIBIN exam, and then they can write a report about that. So they don't go through the full training program. It takes about 6 months instead of 24 months. And so that's why it was helpful to add those folks in so that they could help in a more rapid manner. And so for the last 6 months, we have been doing more cases than we're getting in the door, which is a much better place to be. We have very recently, because of wanting to make sure that we're providing the same service across the Commonwealth, we have expanded our NIBIN search. NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. Unfortunately, it is neither integrated nor national. So if you want to search, you have to tell it where to search, and it actually works more efficiently if you don't search the entire country because of the dilution that the database can have. And so we search cartridge cases against those cartridge cases that are entered into our 4 labs. There is a new system in the Newport News Police Department that is being shared with Hampton, and so we will search those. And then we are also searching things that were entered in DC, Montgomery County, and Prince George County, Maryland, as well as the ATF Zone 1, which is basically the things that ATF has entered on the East Coast. And so that is giving us, because of the porous borders in Northern Virginia, it's giving us a little broader search. So hopefully we did send out a notice designating that that's where the search would be. And we have decided we're not going to put all of that on each report. We're just going to say that we followed our procedure. And so our procedures, again, are online, or you can call and ask if you have any questions about where we had searched. Also in that policy notice, we noted that tool mark evidence will no longer be accepted without a tool for comparison that can be associated with a suspect. We actually get very few tool mark cases every year, less than 50 statewide, and so that would be, bolt cutters on a lock or that type of thing. So we actually get those very infrequently, but if there is no way to associate the tool to a suspect or to a person, it's a lot of time, and so we are happy to do those once a suspect, has been located. And also for distance determinations, we had a lot of evidence in firearms being submitted where only part of the necessary evidence to do the test was being submitted. And so we've just wanting to have pre-submission conferences with a supervisor before turning that in so that everybody can be clear on all the different pieces of evidence that are required to do that examination and understand what the outermost layer of clothing is and all that kind of stuff so that everybody's on the same page. Okay, drugs. I have definitely indicated that we are drowning in drugs, and it is because we are, drowning in drugs, yes. So we have had a 20% increase in the number of cases that are submitted, and those are not marijuana cases. Those are, that are kind of easier to do. Those are the complicated opioids with multiple components and that type of thing. And so we have definitely seen a huge increase in the amount of illicit fentanyl that we are being submitted. This is actually just through 2016, but it will look exactly the same. It will keep going up in 2017 when that data is finalized. The thing about the cases with fentanyl are that if you look at the number of cases that we get into our system that have fentanyl in them, it's about 6%. 6% of our cases, drug cases, have fentanyl. But if you look at the number of overdose deaths that are reported by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, 43% of those have one of these fentanyl compounds in them. So although there are many more drugs in Virginia than just fentanyl, they are definitely deadly, and that's why people are so concerned about them. And so there have been a lot of things that have come out about officer safety and laboratory personnel safety when it comes to these powders. The powders, if they have a puff of powder and you inhale it, it can be an accidental overdose for the first responder or for us. And that is why the DEA started recommending not to do field test kits of powder evidence that could be an opioid. So in order to, for everyone's safety that are handling those types of evidence, we are definitely recommending that powders be double packaged in plastic bags. I know a lot of times we say, for marijuana or plant material, put it in paper so that it can dry. Biology, put it in paper so that it can dry. But for these powders that can puff, plastic is the best way to contain that so that somebody that touches it after you might not have an accidental overdose. And so labeling it in some way as to what could be in there, that is also very helpful. There are a couple links in your, I think that these were provided to you so that you'll have these links. The acryl fentanyl and naloxone effectiveness was a memo that came out that talked about there was a scare that maybe naloxone wasn't effective for some of these fentanyl derivatives, and that that could be a crisis. And this memo is from very renowned toxicologists and medical personnel talking about the fact that naloxone will work, but it might take more than one dose. So don't say, oh, don't even bother. You just might need more than one dose for it to be effective. And then lastly, the best information about handling fentanyls that's come out for first responders is this whitehouse.gov one-page thing that you can hang around your office, and it actually has very important information, things that I hadn't really thought about, that it's not just wash your hands if you think you've come into contact with powder, but absolutely do not use hand sanitizer because that can actually help with the absorption and some of those types of things. And so that information is the most current. So we sent out a policy notice in trying to make sure that we're providing as useful information as possible, but as efficiently as possible, and also with a regard to safety. We had a focus group meeting where we had law enforcement folks as well as Commonwealth's attorneys to talk about how weights are used for evidence that we do, because we were worried about after you guys have taken those powders and put them in the plastic bags, we have to take them out and dump the powder out in order to get a weight of that powder. And so that was a risk that was evaluated. And so we wanted to talk about when those weights were actually needed, because there are very few weight thresholds in Virginia for drugs. And so the Commonwealth attorneys that were at that meeting and the law enforcement, they brought their narcotics guys, people from those same jurisdictions. They agreed that for things under a weight threshold, that it was fine to have a gross weight. And so in order just to skip that manipulation step of where we're dumping out the powder, that is why we made this change to where we are doing the innermost packaging along with the material as the weight in those cases. And also we're just minimizing how many items of marijuana food items. This was particularly up in our Northern Virginia area. There were many, maybe brownies, individually wrapped brownies, or gummy bears, or lollipops, or any kind of other configuration of marijuana type stuff that you can think of, and limiting the number of those that were submitted for analysis. The one other thing just to note here is that our drug folks have been on mandatory overtime, both in the fall and in the spring. And so they are, we are trying to maximize the amount of work that we are doing on these cases without, we have limited it so that we're hopefully not overkilling our folks. Forensic biology, that's DNA. There are quite a few things that have affected the turnaround times and some new things going on in DNA. So the physical evidence recovery kits, or PERCs, those, as you know, almost all of them are now being submitted to us for analysis, and that has increased our submissions of perks about 40%. We got 6 positions in order to be able to handle that, and almost, I think all 6 of them have now just completed their training. And so we have had a bunch of people in forensic biology in training. We had 12 people in training at one point, and now there's 1 more completing their training this week, and so that'll mean 8 are done and only 4 are left. So we're definitely getting to a place where we are upping our capacity, and we're putting some things in place to be able to move faster. I guess I'll talk about the faster in a minute. So the trace DNA submission policy update, we changed our terminology from touch DNA, which was anything where you were swabbing, say, a firearm, looking for DNA of someone who had touched it. We've actually changed our terminology to trace DNA because that DNA that is left behind somewhere may or may not have gotten there because someone actually touched it. It could have gotten there by a secondary transfer or some other way. And so therefore, we just wanted to remove that word touch because it indicates how it got there, and we can't really tell how it got there. So trace DNA, touch DNA, it's the same thing. But the biggest thing is we're no longer requiring that you get a letter from the Commonwealth Attorney to be able to do those, to hopefully make that go a little more smoothly. And just as a reminder, if it is DNA for a felony, it's got to be a felony. But if it's DNA for a felony, drugs, or guns type of charge, we have to have a known to be able to do a direct comparison because those types of crimes are not eligible for databank upload. And so therefore, it cannot go into the DNA databank, and we can't do any kind of comparison. So if you don't have a suspect, we can't figure that out by doing a databank search. We'll have to do the direct comparison. So with that trace DNA, we always take the DNA, if we're gonna do the DNA, and we know that up front, we have a biology person or one of your folks will swab that piece of evidence before it's handled by other sections. So the DNA folks, when they do that swabbing, they are all garbed up so that they are, they've got a hood on and gloves and everything, and it's in a clean area when they do that swabbing. And so other sections, they are not necessarily handling evidence in a clean environment, and that is particularly true in firearms. And so if it is a firearm, we have to swab that first. And so there are some jurisdictions who have now gone to swabbing all guns before submitting them to us and just holding on to those swabs in case they want it done later. So if you're interested in having training as to how to do that, we are providing that training in the Forensic Science Academy, but we're happy to provide that training. Otherwise, or we can do that in the lab just so that it can be saved. Okay, so we also sent out something about perk triage just so that everybody understood what we were doing with the perks. And basically this is just depending on the facts of the case, we may do certain samples or we may do all the samples. So there are some cases where we will not analyze all the samples that are in the box. And that's because if the facts of the case are that it was a sexual assault, it was a vaginal sexual assault, and the person knows what happened, we'll do the samples that are appropriate for that, the vaginal swabs. And we can stop because that'll generally have the evidence that we need, and if not, we can continue. But if it's someone who wakes up, feels like something's weird, doesn't know what happened, we'll probably end up doing every swab in the box. So, we're not deciding what to do just straight as a policy, but we are looking at what information is provided and trying to do the best evidence for that case. So the more efficient that I had mentioned before is our new male DNA screening. And this, I think Brad Jenkins came and talked to you at some other, maybe last year, briefly about the fact that we were looking at this. Our DNA screening is going to replace our microscopic sperm searches. So the microscopic sperm searches actually take quite a long time to, look under a microscope looking for the little sperm cells. And what this does is you take a little bit of your sample and you do a quantitation of the DNA where you say how much DNA is present and how much of it is male DNA. So that way you can find which samples are going to give you the best evidence to move forward for traditional DNA. It is very sensitive, and it looks for cells that we were not able to look at with the microscopic sperm searches or other screening tests such as skin cells, which we could not do, or saliva that we could not do before during the screening process. And so it probably means that more samples will actually be taken to, because of those additional types of cells, more things will be taken to DNA, but it's much more efficient than doing those male DNA screening, with the sperm searches. And lastly, with DNA, or almost lastly, we have, with the Attorney General, we have these grants for the physical evidence recovery kits, the historical ones that were not submitted to us prior to 2016 when the law went into effect. Law enforcement is being contacted. We started with the agencies that had the most kits that were in their possession. And so we started with Virginia Beach because they won the contest. Good job. And they have submitted all of their cases, and all of the results are back, and we are moving down the line. And so the Attorney General's office will contact you when the laboratory, which is Bodie up in Northern Virginia, is ready for you to ship your kits directly to them for testing. And then those come to us after they've been done. The data comes to us so that we can upload that into the data bank, and then we would do a report with the data bank results. So one other thing from one of these grants is to be able, so that we don't get ourselves in this again, we have developed and are developing PERK tracking software, and that will be to track PERKs from the beginning when we send it to the hospital. Then the hospital will mark when it is collected, and when it's sent to law enforcement will mark when they receive it, and it's a very simple system that's being developed. It's web-based, and it has no information in it about the case other than the serial number off the PERK box and when it goes where. So it's not going to be a time-consuming thing to do, and we're hoping to have a couple pilot agencies work with it. Probably this summer is when the vendor says that it'll be ready. Okay, and the last DNA slide is there are some DNA tests that we do not perform. There's something called mini-filer. Some people have wanted that done in old, cold cases. And just FYI, if you are interested in sending DNA evidence to a private laboratory, but then you're interested in having it searched in the database, you have to talk to us before you send it to that private lab so that we can have an agreement in place, because private labs don't have access to CODIS or the DNA data bank, and so they cannot search the evidence. And for us to be allowed to search it, we have to have an agreement in place ahead of time before the testing is done. And we are happy to do that. We've done that for a couple different jurisdictions, but we have to do it ahead of time, and that's one of the requirements of being able to be in CODIS. And so we don't have the ability to grant an exception to that. And then my last slide is just about question documents. We quit doing question documents a few years ago, but there are several federal labs that have offered various services depending on what the type of case is. If you need to get information about how to contact one of those labs, it's Secret Service, Postal, and FBI. Please contact Alka Lohman. She's our Director of Technical Services, and she can give you their contact number. We have agreed not to publish their contact information on our website or something like that, but we are happy to pass that along so that you can talk to them about what the nexus might be with your case and what their services are. The FBI will take it directly from you. I think Postal and Secret Service both have you work with one of their agents so that it can get submitted in that way. And that is all the information I had. I will be outside for a little while after this. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And thank you very much for letting me share this information.